Having a baking stone in your boat oven can make a big difference, eliminating hot spots and producing much better baked goods. But how do you get the most out of yours? Hi there, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley podcast, I'll share some tips to keep your baking stone in good shape for years to come. Now first, today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Mantis Marine, makers of the Mantis Anchor, now available in models with and without a roll bar. Proven to set reliably in the most challenging bottoms, the Mantis Anchor digs like no other, making anchoring safer and boating more enjoyable. Mantis Marine brings to market practical, durable, and affordable marine products, including anchoring gear, scuba diving accessories, and a rechargeable waterproof headlamp for hands-free lighting. Visit mantismarine.com and see for yourself. Using a baking stone, which sometimes is called a pizza stone or a bread stone, is actually pretty simple, and it can make a huge difference in the quality of all of your baked goods, particularly if your oven has hot spots or heats unevenly. The biggest problem that people have with a baking stone is that it can crack or break. If you have a stone that's at least a half-inch thick, and take care to follow a few simple precautions, yours should have a long life. In general, your baking stone should just be left in the oven. The more you handle it, the greater the chance of dropping it or otherwise knocking it against the oven or cracking it. By leaving it in the oven, it'll start out the same temperature as the oven itself and will safely cool off when you're finished baking. Whatever you do, never put a cool stone into a hot oven. It's almost certain to break. To avoid breakage, your stone would just fit inside the oven and not slide around at all. But unfortunately, that wouldn't allow air to move inside the oven, which would cause other problems in baking. So your stone needs to be sized so that there's about an inch of space on all sides. So how then to keep it in place so that the movement of the boat doesn't chip the edges on the walls of the oven? Well, I use little binder clips. It takes a bit of fiddling to set it up at first, but then you can just leave everything in place. I use 4 clips, 2 on each side of the stone. I just clip them into the oven rack. Where the wires are too thin for the clip to stay in place, I put a little bit of aluminum foil around the wire on the oven rack. Now, if you're going to do this, be sure that your clips are all metal, no plastic at all. Now, if your boat oven has 2 racks, put your baking stone on the lower one. Otherwise, put the rack low enough that your pan will fit in the oven on top of the stone, with at least 1 inch, better even 2 inches of airspace on top. Let it preheat 20 to 30 minutes before baking. You can bake pizza or bread directly on the stone, but it's hard to do without what's called a peel. That's those long handles paddles you'll see in pizzerias. The peels help slide things on and off the racks, and peels are hard to use and store in a boat galley. So on a boat, just place your pan directly on the stone. Thick pans will conduct the heat more evenly than thinner ones, so using a baking stone with poor quality pans won't solve all your problems. Really getting good pans is a double way to help. Never place something cold or wet, say from the refrigerator or freezer, onto the hot stone. It will crack. Equally, never let liquid spill onto a hot stone. Okay, what about cleaning your baking stone? Unless something really spills onto it, you don't need to clean the stone. It'll turn a little darker over time, but that's no reason to clean it. The stone is very porous and needs little care. If you spill something really yucky on it, wait until the stone is completely cold, then begin by scraping what you can off with a plastic scraper. A plastic putty knife is best and is a lot cheaper than scraping up with your good kitchen utensils. Then soak the stone in water. Absolutely no soap. Soap will permeate the stone and be impossible to rinse out. To be honest, I just skipped the soak in water stage unless it's something that really didn't scrape off. Anything else will just bake off the next time you use it. If you really, really need to clean your baking stone, mix a thick paste of baking soda and water, rub it on the stone, and let it sit for 15 minutes or so, and then rinse it with hot water. Don't use the stone again until it's thoroughly dry. It will crack if it's heated when wet or even damp. I hope you found this episode of the Boat Galley podcast interesting and informative, helpful even. Please, if so, be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app and tell your friends.